World-renowned dog trainer Karen Pryor wrote a book called Don't Shoot the Dog, and she was simply talking about the fact that a lot of the problems that owners have with their dogs is not the dog's fault, but rather our fault. And we can improve ourselves as companions and trainers to our dogs by learning about the four core types of training techniques. My name is Dinah Woodman. I've been training dogs for 12 years, and I've been a professional dog trainer for about 3 years. I have also been on two European Open Juniors World Agility teams, and my Border Collie and I will be trying out for the European Open team in December. Before we begin, there are two things you should always have during a training session, and that is a marker and a reward. The marker is important when we train so that the dog knows what they did right, and this can be any sort of sound that is indicative to the dog that they did the correct behavior. This can be a verbal marker like a yes or a good, or a lot of trainers prefer a clicker because it sounds the same every time. The dog cannot mistake the noise, and it's a lot easier to use a clicker if you're a talkative person while you train like me. You can then, rewards. This can be toys, treats, or praise. This is the dog's incentive to work for us. We don't go to work for free, so why should our dogs? The reward always follows the marker, whether the marker was given accidentally or not, and toys and treats will be a lot higher value to the dogs than praise, so think about that during your training session. What's more valuable to my dog? So let's talk about the four core training techniques, which include luring, targeting, shaping, and capturing, and we'll go over what they are and kind of how they work. Our first technique is luring. This is where we use an incentive to guide the dog into the desired behavior. For example, if we want to lure a dog into a sit, we'd take the treat or whatever reward, and we'd put it on their nose, and we'd lift up our hand and move it kind of backwards until the dog's butt hits the ground, and then we give our mark and reward. This takes the least amount of patience on the trainer or handler's part, and the dog usually catches on pretty quickly for simple behaviors like sit. So both the trainer and the dog are kind of rewarded for the speed at which the behavior occurs. But there are some drawbacks to luring. Patricia McConnell, the author of The Other End of the Leash, outlines them really well. She says if you're not careful to drop out the lure and the visual signal early on, the movement becomes the cue. So luring creates a really obvious hand motion or body motion to the dog, and it can be difficult for inexperienced trainers or handlers to know when they should start fading the lure out. Another drawback to luring is the lack of understanding of the behavior because the dog is focused on the food, not the task at hand. Therefore, when we take the lure out and we take the motion out, the dog has no idea what we're asking of them. So this kind of leads to a lack of generalization as well. The dog has trouble doing it in other situations, and they just don't understand the behavior overall when we use a luring technique, but it does produce quick results. So it requires little patience on the handler's part and can be used to do a quick, simple behavior, but you got to be careful not to create unnecessary problems on the dog and handler's part. Our next technique requires a little more patience on the trainer and handler's part, and when I say a little more patience, I mean a lot of patience. And this is shaping. Shaping is where we begin a training session with a very general criteria, and then we refine that criteria as the dog begins to understand general concepts. It is important for the handler to stay very still and stagnant during shaping. For example, if we want our dog to put their feet in a bucket, in order to shape that, you would wait for your dog to offer to put the paw in the bucket. And it's very important not to lure your dog or give your dog any kind of motion signals or verbal signals while we shape. And once the dog understands to put one paw in the bucket, then we can bump up the criteria. We can stop rewarding for one paw in the bucket and only reward for 2 paws in the bucket. Once they understand 2 paws, then we can move on to 3 paws and 4 paws, and then 4 paws and a sit. So kind of think about it like stair steps. You have to do step 1 in order to get to step 6. Um, so that's kind of the gist of shaping. So like I said, it requires the handler to be very still and for the dog to offer the behavior, which I know it's a lot harder than it sounds. But it allows the dog to generalize and learn what they're doing and learn the behavior so much better than any of the other techniques we talk about. It really makes them think through what they're doing so that behavior is understood on a fundamental level rather than us having to guide them. So this thinking through everything allows the dog great mental stimulation. It provides and promotes great body awareness, problem solving, and it helps avoid over-arousal when done with puppies. However, in adult dogs, it can cause some frustration if they weren't worked on impulse control or problem solving as puppies or young adults. The next point we're going to go over is kind of like a combination of shaping and luring, and that's targeting. This is where we use a target that the dog follows either with a nose or a paw or any other type of body part in order to put the dog into our desired position. Ken Ramirez, who is the Chief Training Officer and Executive Vice President of Karen Pryor Academy, puts the beginning steps of training, targeting, kind of in a stair-step order. So you'd begin with basic targeting, which is a nose touch to hand. Then you'd work on targeting a variety of different targets, like a target plate, target sticks, maybe like a harness, pretty much any object you could think of that would be useful to target. Then he works on following the target. Can the dog follow the, keep a nose on your hand all the way down the hallway, something like that. Then he moves on to targeting with other body parts. So can the dog target with a paw? Can the dog target with a shoulder? Can they do their back paws, maybe a hip? Pretty much anything you could think of for the dog to be able to target with. And then he works on extension and duration. Can the dog move from point A to point B, or can they target multiple targets at once, and how long can they hold that target for? Targeting is great for dogs who struggle with over-arousal and excitement issues, as it gives them one calm object to focus on, whereas luring, you have a reward or incentive on you that can cause some over-arousal in dogs, and dogs get super frantic when it's around. But targeting gives them a calm object. They know that the reward's not going to come from the object, but that they get the reward from targeting the object. So it can be great for dogs with over-arousal and excitement issues. It's also great for cooperative care and fear-free training. Lots of fearful dogs benefit from it. As the target, we build up a lot of reward value for, because we have the dog touch the target and then we reward. And so you can kind of transfer that onto people. If a dog is scared of strangers, you can start having them target the stranger, and then strangers become a rewarding experience rather than a scary experience. But targeting isn't great for generalization or understanding of the behavior, because the dog is focused on the target, not necessarily the task at hand. So if you want a really deep understanding of a behavior, shaping is the best way to go. Typically with our agility dogs, shaping is going to be the best way to teach the dog to do something, because it will be easier to put onto a verbal cue so that we can be doing anything and cueing it while our dog is running. And they really understand the behavior and everything that their body needs to do in order to do the behavior. Our last technique requires the most amount of patience and perseverance on the handler's part. It really takes guts, and that's capturing. Capturing is where the handler waits for the dog to perform a desired behavior in any everyday habit, setting, behavior, and then rewarding that specific behavior until the dog understands what they're doing correctly, which can take a long time. That's why capturing is usually used for behaviors that are nearly impossible to recreate with luring, shaping, or targeting. Things like whole body shakes, licking their lips, um, just really difficult things that would be hard to recreate. Capturing requires you to have your marker and reward with you at all times, which a lot of people struggle with, especially if you're a clicker trainer. Um, this can kind of be a downfall, um, that it is hard to have a clicker on you at all times. Um, so it takes a great deal of time for the dog to understand the behavior and what they're doing to get the reward, but it can produce fun, unusual tricks for you to show off to your friends and do fun things with. So in conclusion, we talked about the 4 types of training techniques: luring, shaping, targeting, and capturing. We learned that some are good for generalization and understanding, namely shaping, and others are good for confidence building, energy matching, and creating fun behaviors. And don't just think this is for words, Zaina. Don't just think that this is for dog training. It can be used on any animal. Cats, mice. Lori Torini uses the targeting method with her snakes to guide them from enclosure to enclosure when she needs to clean, especially with venomous snakes or anything else. So I implore you to go home and kind of learn more about how to do these techniques and give your dog a positive training experience and really bond with your dog over what we just learned. So thanks. Bye.